Hi, today I'm going to show you how to knit this size adjustable basic dog cardigan. Step by step tutorial. Let's get started. Please check my description box for all the details, such as yarn, needle, and written pattern. This is very basic dog cardigan sweater, and I knitted it from top to bottom. And front piece, there are some buttons, obviously, because this is cardigan. And obviously there are some buttons out front because this is cardigan. And I'm going to tell you one thing before start. I wasn't quite sure whether my dog likes cardigan or not, so I knitted it a little bit bigger than usual, so I can actually put this on as a sweater. Anyway, that's the dog leg opening. Also, this is complete seamless, as you can see. There's no seam, right? And even though the leg opening, there's no seam, which I really like. And this is size adjustable sweater, so if you have a smaller dog or bigger dog, you don't have to worry about it. Anyway, so that's the front, and back part is little bit carved. I am using short row technique. I'll talk about it later. Anyway, let's get started. This is the yarn I used. Let's make a cast. Multiple of 2. I made 70. The reason why I picked the number 70 because I usually start with 70 casts to make my dog sweater. If you never knit the dog sweater before, you should take a gauge and find out right cast on number. And it has to be multiple of 2. And this time, I am going to knit flat. Okay, this is right side and the other side is wrong side. Always check the bottom of the stitch. So the rib starts on wrong side, and then first 5 stitch and last 5 stitch I'm gonna make garter stitch until end of the sweater. Okay, because this is going to be the buttonhole rib for both sides. So always knit even though wrong side. Okay, wrong side, right side, it doesn't matter. Always knit stitch. And I am going to add marker there. So, I'm never gonna make a mistake. I'm not adding right now, but I will ended up adding the marker. Anyway, this is wrong side, so the rib should be repeat of purl 1 and knit 1 after the knit 5. Okay, so repeat purl 1, knit 1, purl 1, knit 1 until last 5 stitch, and then again last 5 stitch should be garter stitch, which is knit on the wrong side and right side. So there you go. I told you I'm gonna add the marker there and then start knitting last 5 stitch. And from row number 2, it doesn't really matter which side you are on, just knit over knit stitch and purl over purl stitch, except the first and last 5 stitch. As I told you, always knit, right? So make a rib until your desired length. I knitted it about just a little over 1 inch. By the way, first and last 5 stitch will be overwrapped because those are buttonhole rib. Anyway, repeat row number 1 and row number 2 until your desired length. And you finish on right side. I haven't finished the rib, but I would like to make first buttonhole. Has to be on right side. Bind off where you want to put the buttonhole. For me, the third one. So there you go. Knit 1 and knit 2, then bind third stitch off. So there's only 4 stitch instead of the 5 stitch. Okay, and leave it as is, and I should put marker there so you're never gonna forget, right? Anyway, I just told you I haven't finished the ribs, so after the first the 5 stitch, I'm gonna keep ribbon, and again I am going to add marker where I did the bind off, so next time you're never gonna forget you're mid of doing buttonhole. Okay, so my rib is done. Buttonhole is not done yet. Anyway, this is last 5 stitch. I'm just knitting. There we go. So the rib you have to finish on right side, and this is wrong side. I just turn around, right? So I am going to make up all purl besides the first and last 5 stitch. So knit 5, and then after the marker all purl because this is wrong side. Okay, so purl all the way down, and then you have to finish to create the buttonhole. Anyway, remember first and last 5 stitch has to be garter stitch, which is knit for both sides. From now on, in middle of the marker, stockinette stitch. Anyway, it's end of the purl row. There you go. So let's finish the buttonhole. Now you have to knit 2, and there's only 4 stitch, which means you have to create 1 stitch right on top of the bind off in previous row. So I am going to add 1 cast right top of the bind off in previous row. There we go, there. And sometimes people think that only 1 bind off buttonhole is too small. It's not true, because the button I am going to use is tiny one. So one, the stitch buttonhole is big enough, because this is knit. It's very, stretchy. Okay, so now I have 5 stitch. There you go. So just keep knitting. That's the one, I just add, right? So you just knit, pretend, nothing happened, right? There you go. And after that, this is right side, so I keep knitting. And by the way, let's look at the buttonhole you just create right there. Seems like too small, but it's not too small. So, I recommended you to create only 1 stitch buttonhole. Anyway, do the stockinette stitch 2 rows. Stockinette stitch is knit on the right side and purl on the wrong side. And then start making leash opening. I already add the marker, right? So whenever you're ready for leash opening, you count evenly from both sides and put 2 markers for leash opening. I have 12 stitch for the leash opening. And this time I'm going to show you 1 row buttonhole technique. Okay? And it has to be on right side. So knit until first leash opening marker. And you can create the leash opening anywhere you want, but I am going to increase few stitches after that. So, you should watch my video first and make a plan ahead. That's actually key for your success. Okay, so knit until first leash opening marker. Here comes. So remove the first marker and then yarn front. Okay, then slip 1 purlwise, slip 1, and then yarn back, slip 1 purlwise, then bind off, slip 1 purlwise and bind off, slip 1, bind off. You just have to keep doing same thing until the second marker. And I have to mention one thing later, okay, about the one last stitch. Also, as you can see, I'm holding the working yarn, but I am not using working yarn, which means stitches getting tighter and tighter, but just take your time. Try not to drop the stitch off. Okay, so here comes end of the leash opening stitch. I just want to mention one thing. The last one stitch is not the one you think, which is this one. Okay, the real last stitch is right there. So remove the marker and you have to do one more thing. That's the one you just bind off is the last stitch. Okay, and this stitch is actually belong to outside of the leash opening. So I'm going to transfer one back onto the left needle. Then you turn the working yarn obviously attached to the other side, right? Now I have to create the new cast, which is cable cast. You put the needle in between first and second stitch and then make stitch and hook onto left needle like that, and don't pull the working yarn yet. Put the needle first and then pull as much as you want and hook onto left needle and put the needle, then pull through, then hook onto left needle. And you have to do this, for me, 13, because I need 12 plus 1 extra cast. Okay, so the whatever your number you bind off plus 1 extra. For me, 13. And I want to talk about the cable cast. As you can see, whenever you pull the yarn through 2 stitch, okay, you can pull the yarn as much as you want. And then grab the yarn with the left needle, kind of twisted way. And don't pull the working yarn so hard until you put the needle in between first and second stitch, because when you pull so hard, it's really tough to put the needle in again. You know what I'm saying? So again, hook onto left needle and then loosen up, then pull the needle in. You know what I'm saying? That way it's much easier to put the needle in again. All right? So once again, I bind off 12 stitches in previous row. So I am going to add 13 stitch, which is bind off number plus 1 extra. There we go. And then now you turn around, then yarn back, then slip 1 purlwise again, then 1 bind off to reconnect. There you go. Then the last stitch you transfer onto left needle like that. Now it's all connect. Then the one you transfer, knit there and keep knitting. This is how you do it for 1 row buttonhole technique. So let's move on increasing. If you ever knit my dog sweater, you know after the neck rib, I start increasing around the chest part. But this time, I am going to increase at once. Maybe, twice. And here is the calculation, okay? I actually increased twice this time. The first increasing 20% of whole stitch. I have 70 stitch, so 70 stitch times 0.2, which is 20%, is 14. So I decided to increase 15 stitch. So in between markers, I have to increase stitches. So 60 stitch divided by 15 is 4. So I am going to increase 1 stitch every 4 stitch. And I am going to use knit front and back technique to increase. You can increase 30% or 40% at once if you want to. Depend on your dog. So you really have to make a plan ahead. I am going to increase only 20% and then see what happens. Okay, so let's do that. After the marker, after the garter stitch, I am going to start increasing. Okay, so again, every 4 stitch, you increase 1. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's the stitch I am going to increase. Knit front, then do not drop off the stitch. Keep it, and then knit back. There you go. You knit 2 stitch in 1 stitch, then drop the stitch off from the left. So let's do that again. Knit 1, 2, 3. Every 4 stitch I have to do knit front and back. Knit front, don't drop the stitch off, then knit back loop. Then drop the stitch off from the left needle. That's knit front and back. So you gotta do this. So after increasing row, I have 60 plus 15, So 75 plus 10 garter stitch, so 85. And after this, put this on to your dog and make sure, the increase in stitches enough or not. If it's not enough, you can increase more. But I don't think you should increase right after. Okay, so, keep knitting few rows and make sure again. And then next increasing, it doesn't have to be 20%. But I use same number, 15, stitch I increased. So this time, 75 divided by 15 is 5. So I did every 5 stitch. You increase 1 stitch with KFB. And increasing is always on the right side. And tip number 1, as I told you, you can change increasing percentage depend on your dog. If your dog is very chunky like a Frenchie, you might want to increase more, 30%. And you don't really have to, divide it by 2, like, increase number 1 and number 2. You can increase 40% at once, and that's it. It's really up to you. So, if you ever knit my dog sweater, you kind of have an idea how many stitches you increase, right? So, around that. Plus, for me, this time I wasn't quite sure. He likes the cardigan type. So, I thought maybe I should, add more, stitches. So make sure it's big enough for him. That's why I increase twice and total of 30 stitches. So this is right after the increasing number 1. Not too much. So I thought maybe I should, increase more. So after a few rows, I increase second time. Here is the tip number 2. You must increase stitches before the leg starts. Usually, most of the dog has bigger chest than tummy. But, if your dog is, chubby dog in general, you might want to increase around tummy. But not too many dogs are like that, right? The chest part is bigger. So you should finish increasing before the leg. And if you really need to increase after the leg, you can do that too. But, most of the dog has smaller tummy than chest, I believe. For me, for my dog's tummy is quite smaller, so I even decrease some stitches. And I just want to, make sure, don't forget to do the buttonhole. This is up to you, every 1 inch or every 10 rows, you should make some kind of the routine, I actually go by rows, every 10 rows I'm going to make, the buttonhole, something like that. So easy to remember, right? So I gotta write it down how many rows, write it down or use the, the stitch counter to make sure. Sometimes you forget easily because you have to do increase, you have to think about the leg opening, stuff like that. Please make sure about it. And here is after second time increasing. There you go. And I already add marker for legs. And I think this is enough increasing for my dog. Okay, so now I want to talk about the leg opening. Once you hit the enough length, you have to, create the leg opening. So I add markers. Count stitch evenly from the mid part and put 2 markers for both legs. You have to make sure the location of the your dog's leg. Okay? So count stitch evenly from mid part and add 2 markers. And the leg opening, you have to start on right side again. Okay? You gotta remember this. Because I'm not knitting in round, so sometimes, you forget. So I am going to tell you and make sure about it though. And I'm gonna make leg opening a little bit bigger. And this time, again, I'm not knitting in round, which means I have to separate, the parts here and there into 3 parts. But you will ended up reconnect. And if you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, just watch the video. Let's start making first leg opening. So knit until first leg opening marker. So the first 5, just knit 5. And then this is right side, has to be right side. So knit until the marker. And then remove the marker, turn the work, and keep knitting. Well, this is wrong side, so purl. And you just do the stockinette stitch, back and forth, until your desired length. I did 8 rows altogether. And that's enough for, leg opening. So I go back and forth, 8 rows altogether. Forget about the rest right now. Here comes 8 rows. After 8 rows, like that. And make sure that's gotta be big enough. See? You know what I'm saying? And this is the first part I just finished. And then I am going to do the other side of the leg, the front part. So I'm going to cut the yarn and move on to the other side. But again, I told you it has to be right side, right? So all you need to do is transfer stitches onto left needle because you want to start from right side. You know what I'm saying? That's why I told you you have to be on right side and you have to remember that. You kind of want to, start on, wrong side so you don't have to, transfer any stitch, right? But it doesn't work that way. So there you go. So look at my video and first of all, transfer stitch until the first leg marker. There you go. and that's a garter marker, right? So just transfer everything. 2 more stitch. Take your time. It's sometimes, hard to transfer. There you go. And you can remove that marker. And then join new ball of yarn. There you go. And start knitting from the right side, facing to right side, and then knit, knit, knit. And here comes last 5 stitch, which is garter stitch. So knit 5 and then turn the work. And again, you do exactly same thing. So I did 8 rows. So this time you have to do 8 rows. So you know what I'm saying? If you start with wrong side because you don't want to, transfer any stitch, it doesn't work, because if you start with wrong side, you finish with wrong side, right? I mean, the right side. So whenever you want to connect everything together, it's not good. Anyway, there you go. So after 8 rows, looks like that. Okay, the same level and all good. So now you have to do back part. So cut the yarn. This is the third part. And now you have to transfer dog leg stitch onto stitch holder. So anyway, transfer back onto right needle, and then this time transfer onto right needle, because you want to start on right side for back piece as well. Same old, same old. There you go. And you know which one is the back part, right? You can see the, dog leg opening marker, and I'm trying to knit, which is wrong, right? Because this is dog leg stitch. Now I figured it out, and I grabbed the stitch holder. If you don't have stitch holder, you should use the, scrap yarn and transfer those leg opening stitch. You can bind off if you want, but I like to save original stitch as much as possible. There we go. And then remove the stitch holder. The marker. Then let's start knitting. Again, 8 rows, starting from right side, right? And just knit back and forth, back and forth. And also you have to transfer the other side of the leg stitch onto stitch holder too. So you have to knit until next marker, right? Right there. And the rest of the 12, I believe it's 12 stitch, should be on stitch holder. Here comes. This is the first row for the back piece, and hit the marker, remove it, and transfer all the leg stitch onto stitch holder. And then finish the back piece. Total of 8 rows. There we go. So turn the work, and this time wrong side, so all purl. And I meet you, after I knit, 8 rows. So now I'm done. 8 rows for 2 front piece and then, the 1 back piece. 8 rows. And then reconnect must be on right side. Well, to be really honest, doesn't have to be right side, but this way easier, right? Always start on right side. So let's get ready. Transfer some stitch back, getting ready to, reconnect, and you must knit from the beginning, right? So now I guess I'm ready. And I want to use the, working yarn where I cut. So now I tie the knot. There we go. Make sure it's really tight, right? And then start reconnecting. There we go. It's quite simple to reconnect. Just knit until the gap. And wherever the gap is, just add new cast. If you put the 12 stitch onto the stitch holder, you gotta add 12 new cast. That's it. If you put the 14 stitch onto stitch holder, you have to add 14 new cast. Always same number this time. So I'm knitting until the gap. There we go. And now gap. I have a 12 stitch on stitch holder, so I am going to add 12 stitch. That's about it. After the adding new cast, just keep knitting until next gap, and you do exactly same thing, adding 12 new cast. That's it. Quite simple. There we go. And this is a little bit loose on the first stitch, so you just have to be careful. I am going to use both, yarn to make sure it's tight enough. You don't have to if you don't want to. There you go. And again, as I just said, you just keep knitting until next gap. That's gotta be the leg opening, quite big, so your dog should be happy about it. Here comes the other leg opening. I'm adding same amount. By the way, a lot of people asking me to knit dog's cardigan, but I try to avoid it because it seems like a little bit more harder than just knitting dog sweater. I'm not quite sure, but it's simple enough, but seems like for me it's much harder to make a video. I don't know why, but seems okay so far. This is very basic, the cardigan. Anyway, after this, quite simple. Just keep knitting, stockinette stitch. I put it on him, look at this. This is beautiful. And I was thinking maybe I'm gonna, decrease a little bit, later on, because my seriously dog is very skinny. Well, it's not skinny, but the tummy is quite skinny. So just keep knitting, stocking it, the knit on the right side and purl on the wrong side. And then now I decide I am going to decrease. And whenever you decrease, please decrease evenly. So, I add markers evenly, and then I am going to decrease with knit two together. Very simple. So, knit until 2 stitch before the marker and knit two together. That's about it. And there's no, math for this. The whatever, you want to decrease, go ahead. I actually decrease around 10 stitches total. Maybe 5 here and later on another 5, something like that. Again, my dog has very skinny tummy. So now I knit enough for tummy length, but not enough for back. So I'm going to use the basic short row technique for back piece. Kind of make the little curve, naturally. And I'm not going to use the German short row or Japanese short row technique because this is very basic one. First of all, count whole stitches. Mine 75. And decide how many rows do you want to add. 15 for me. So the magic number should be whole stitch divided by how many rows you want. So mine 75 stitches divided by 15 rows I want to add equal 5. So my magic number is 5. So knit all the way, okay, down to last 5 stitch. So here is the buttonhole I have to do. Very busy row. So full stitch, you gotta remember that, So I'm going to add marker there. So I'm never gonna forget because I won't come back for a little while. So knit all the way down until last 5 stitch right there. There you go. And then turn the work. You're not knitting that 5. And then just keep knitting. This time wrong side, so purl. Purl all the way down, but until last 5 stitch. And you just, keep doing this. So you knit less and less and less, which means you just go back and forth, so center will be longer and both side is shorter length. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, this is the short row number 3. Knit until last 5 stitch from the gap. Okay, I already put the marker, so I never gonna, miss, right? So whenever you turn and knit 5 stitch, maybe you should put the marker. So there you go. So the next time you come back, you stop right there. So easy, right? You don't have to count. Yeah. And then, the rule number 4, same thing. The difference is, the rule number 4 is wrong side, so PURL. And you just, repeat rule number 3 and rule number 4 until those markers come close. When to stop, it's up to you, but I don't want to, I don't want to do this until the end because it's going to be too pointy. So in between markers should be at least 10 stitches away. You know what I'm saying? So again, I want to tell you again, you just keep back and forth, but the stitch getting shorter and shorter because 5 stitches less both side. You know what I'm saying? So in the center of the back is always knitting, so getting longer and longer. And turn, and there we go. The marker is come close. And again, those 2 markers, if it's less than 10 stitch in between, maybe that's the time you want to stop because you don't want, the center is too pointy. But it's really up to you. If you want to have the pointy, back, you can do that too. As you can see, slowly, gradually, increase. So little curve, right? Can you see? Yeah. And that's the time I stop. And now you gotta finish this short row. You start with knit, so you have to finish with knit. So to close the gap has to be right side first. Okay, so let's see. Remove the marker, and I'm gonna do one more. So this is wrong side, so I'm not going to close any gap yet. The gap which you create every time you turn and then start knitting the opposite direction, you create the gap. That's what I'm talking about, the gap. Okay, and I hit the marker, remove it, and turn. Whenever you turn and then knitting opposite way, you create the gap right there. So I'm on the right side, so I am going to finish, which means closing all the gap you create. And again, this time, simple, just knit all the way down. You cannot avoid tiny gap, but most likely you can close the gap. If you really want to close that gap, you have to use the German short row technique or Japanese short row technique. I'm not using those 2 techniques in this tutorial because I want to keep simple. Okay, so you just have to knit all the way down. This is, I just, close one gap. Here comes gap and just knit over it. Again, you cannot close completely. Tiny bit of the hole, but you wouldn't notice really. If you really look at it, yeah, you can actually tell. Okay? So knit till end, and now turn the work, and this time purl to close everything. The first and last 5 stitch, always knit. Right? And then first half, there's no more gap really, because you just closed on right side, right? So just purl, and from the mid part, there's a gap. But you don't have to worry about it too much. Just make a purl. That's about it. There you go. And if you want to use the other technique for short row, I have a video using the Japanese short row. I am going to put the link in my description box so you can actually look at it. But, you know, you don't really need to. And I probably knit another, cardigan for my dog, and maybe I'm gonna put the, German short row or Japanese short row technique there. Anyway, after short row done, start making rib at the very bottom. So no more buttonhole for me. So just repeat off, knit 1 and purl 1 until your desired length. And I knitted it about the 1 inch, something like that. So after the rib, you just cast off. Again, in this tutorial, I want to make it so simple, so I didn't add too many length for back part, because whenever you stop for tummy, I started the short row technique, so I only increase 20 rows, something like that. So the length will be shorter for back, shorter than usual. But, I'm sorry, I just want to make it simple this time. And maybe second time, third time, I'm going to use the different technique to, make it longer. All right? So here's the thing. Maybe 1.5 inches longer than tummy, the back part. Now, let's do the sleeve. Almost there. Okay? And super simple. Transfer all the sleeve stitch, legs, stitch onto needle from the stitch holder. And rest of the area, there's no stitch, so you have to actually knit up. And if you knit up, multiple of 2 would be great. You need stitch count total of multiple of 2. I actually pick up 8 stitch for both sides each, so that's gonna be 16, right? And then 12 stitch at the bottom because 12 stitch on top, so 24 plus 16 is, I guess, 40, right? Which is multiple of 2, so it's perfect. Knit up right on the edge. You put the needle in and then just knit up. That's it. Super easy. 2, 3, and most important thing for sleeve is you have to write it down, whatever you did, because you have 2 legs, right? So you got to do exactly same thing for the other, leg. So write it down, how many, stitch you knit up and how many rows you knit, stuff like that. So it's, balanced it out. Once you knit up all around, put the begin marker and knit 1 round. And if you want to, make the sleeve longer, you can knit more rows, or you can just start making rib and make it longer. It's really up to you. It doesn't really matter, but I want kind of shorter sleeve, so I am going to start making rib right after the first knit round. So, which is repeat all, knit 1 and purl 1. You just have to be very careful on the first row, and from second row you just knit over knit stitch and purl over purl stitch. Now you're actually knitting in round. And I'm using the magic loop technique. I really like using the longer cable, easier for me. So if you've never done the magic loop technique, I'm gonna put the link in my description box. Also, you can use the double point needle as well. You don't really have to do the magic loop if you don't like it. And if you cannot knit round, I guess you have to knit flat half 2 times and then sew them up, something like that. Anyway, after you make a rib, just cast off and you do exactly same thing for the other leg. Pretty much it. And the lastly, button. I don't really have to, show you how to put the button, but I am going to show you anyway. From the buttonhole, put the needle in and make sure where you want to put the button. So, whenever you decide, there you go. Pick up the stitch like that. And then this is double thread. So put the needle in between those 2 threads and make it stay like that. There you go. Because this is not fabric, so you can't really make it stay. So there you go. And after this, same old, same old. Just put the button. There you go. And I didn't want to use the yarn, because if you use the yarn, it won't stay because it's kind of, stretchy, right? So this time you should use just a regular, thread. make sure it's secure. And that's pretty much it. So this is my first cardigan tutorial. If you think this is too difficult, or if you have any question, please let me know in the comment area. Okay, so bye for now. Enjoy knitting.